or manage your personal finances? Your search stops right here. Join Mukonke Mukonkela from Inside Partners Africa every Tuesdays at 0720 hours on the Dalama Insights Business Show.
It is a good morning and welcome to the Ndalama Insights Business Show. Of course, I'm Leslie Sinyangwa. You tune into ZMBC's Radio 4, and we'll be analyzing recent economic events and how they may impact your personal finances. And joining us today is our usual guest, CEO of Insight Partners Africa, Mukonke Mkonkela. Mukonke, it is a good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Leslie. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And how are you?
Good, thanks. How has been the week so far?
Can't complain. Yeah, it's one of those things, and I think this is a very proper topic for today. Recent economic events and how they may impact your personal finances. I've just noticed the dollar right now is at what 22 kwacha, 50, 60, depending on the way you're trading it from.
That's right.
So if you made a quotation for someone about a month ago,
hmm
um, well, you basically made a bit of a loss if you do international sort of business, right?
That's true.
Yeah, it is quite hectic.
It is, eh?
Yeah, it is very hectic. But that's what we're talking about today, isn't it?
hmm
The idea that economic events can impact your personal finances, and we're looking at how they do that. Let's jump right in. We've seen reports about Zambia's annual inflation rate hitting about 12.6% in October 2023, which is the highest since March 2022. What would you say is driving this surge in inflation?
One of the reasons is what you actually mentioned at the start, Leslie, the depreciating kwacha against the US dollar. We know that the kwacha is tagged against the US dollar, and recently we've seen a drastic downward trend in terms of the performance of the Zambian kwacha against the US dollar. This obviously affects a lot of areas, one of which is costs. We see production costs going up in many industries, particularly the mining sector, on which the Zambian economy depends very much. So we see that production costs go up, even reduced production because inputs are expensive. You see business owners, particularly the SMEs, with increased costs of production or costs of procuring their inventory or stock from overseas or abroad. This affects their quantities in terms of how much they can afford to bring into the country. As a result, it also affects the overall gross domestic produce of the country, resulting in a drop or in an increase in inflation as a result. So all these increasing costs, and also lately, recently we've seen fuel as well. Costs of fuel imports have really increased over the past few months as well. And a number of factors are also contributing to this, including global events that we are seeing. So these are the factors that affect inflation. And it's quite unfortunate that now we stand at 12.6%, even when our government, the central bank, target is below 6%. And that's very far from attaining that target, as we can all see.
But what does this mean though for the average Zambian? Like how will this high inflation rate impact daily lives and personal finances?
So it has a direct impact on families and individuals, all of us, in fact. The high inflation rate affects the value of the Zambian kwacha. I've always said that whenever inflation is increasing, the prices, the power of your kwacha, the amount of goods that you could have bought maybe with 1,000 kwacha last month will not be the same. So the quantity of the goods you bought last month with 1,000 kwacha will not be the same. It will be reduced. So the quantity of the goods you bought will reduce because of the increase in the prices for the goods. So that has a direct impact on individuals and families as well. And also, the money that you make cannot stretch as far as the next payroll because you're unable to afford what you could. So it means you have to make extra income so that you can stretch your money further. And if you've got a fixed income through a salary, that becomes extremely difficult and it also impacts how you save money. We've been talking about financial goals and savings and investing. With this stretch in your income, it becomes really difficult for you to actually even have a plan to save and even consider investing. So inflation has profound impacts on how you manage your finances, and also, generally how your investments are performing as well. Because with an increase in inflation, it also erodes the value of your investments, especially if you are not looking at this closely in terms of your investment portfolios. So very important that we're having this discussion today so that we can see how you can consider these economic factors and how they impact not just your day-to-day living, but also, in fact, more importantly for me, your savings and your investments.
Now, what
Yes.
can our listeners do to protect their investments from eroding due to inflation?
So there are a number of factors. It's really hard. We cannot say it's easy. But one thing you need to do is something lazy that we've spoken about. Do you remember it? What do you think? I mean, you and I have been on this for a while now. Guess, give it a guess. Even those that are listening, give it a guess. What do you think you can do in a period like this with your investments? How do you protect your investments from being eroded by inflation?
You put it in what? In bonds and so on and so forth. I think that's what we've been talking about all this time.
Yes, we have. So you need to consider investments that are not impacted negatively by inflation. And that is why we always talk about diversifying your investment. If you find that you keep money, in, let's say, a savings account, which earns you an interest rate of, I'm going to be really generous to the banks, 5% savings account. This is very rare. Let's just assume it's there. Um, you keep your money in a savings account that gives you 5%, and then inflation right now stands at 12.6%. It means that your money has lost value because your real interest rate is a negative. So you need to deduct the 12.5% minus 5% to get your real return on the investment in this savings account. And as you can see, that's a negative, right? So you need to consider investments that can beat inflation. The target is to beat inflation. So if I'm going to invest, if I'm going to keep money at the bank, will I be getting more than 12.6%? Okay. And that is why you need to consider investments that can beat inflation. Examples I like to give is, rental property, investing in real estate. Because with real estate, with an increased inflation rate, all you can do is go back to your tenants and agree with them to say, guys, the cost of living has increased, this and this and that. I'm also revising my rentals upwards because of this. You've got a reason, a basis to increase your rentals. So property normally is a good investment that performs really well even in periods of high inflation. And we could also look at diversifying your investments. So other looking at investments, but also not just investing in a certain asset class that doesn't perform really well in periods of inflation, but considering other investments, like I've given an example. So yes, we've been speaking about government bonds. They're a great investment. For the 15-year government bond, you get coupon incomes of about 15%. But then if you also consider inflation, it's something that you need to regularly consider, which is why you always need to listen to the news. How does this impact the coupon incomes that I'm expected to make every quarter? Right now, if I've invested in a 15-year government bond, I'm getting a 14% every after 6 months, which it beats inflation, by the way. But then with government bonds, these are long-term investments. We are looking at the future, and the further we go, the higher the impact in terms of inflation on our investments, especially on fixed income investments. And that is why you need to always go back, monitor the performance of your investments, consider reinvesting in other areas that will beat inflation. And that's just the way to go.
Now, we talked a bit about savings, but what about the impact of inflation on loans, for instance?
That's good. That's a good question, Leslie. You know, inflation affects the interest rates that are set by the central bank. In our case, that's Bank of Zambia, right? You may have heard in the news that you may have heard in the news recently, Bank of Zambia, in fact, it was yesterday. I was shocked. I don't know why I'm even getting shocked because I've been hearing this for a while now. So now our interest rates stand at 14%, I think, approximately, as per the news communicated yesterday. Now, as always, whenever the base rate, that the rate that BOZ announced yesterday is called the policy lending rate or the base rate, which is the rate that they normally work with financial institutions, that also has an impact on what the banks are going to afford to be able to lend to us in terms of interest rates. I'm using the word afford because we all know that on top of the 14%, which is the base, financial institutions also add on their own rates depending on several factors, including the risk profile, how they've assessed the risk of individuals or companies, and all these factors. But the key point here is, with an increasing inflation rate, we also expect an increase in the interest rates, and that also affects our loans, those of us that have borrowed from financial institutions. So very soon, I am pretty sure, this is normally communicated pretty fast. We're going to hear news from many financial institutions communicating the revised interest rates on the loans that you have, mortgages and other loans that you might have gotten from these banks. So that's a negative impact on borrowing. And unfortunately for us in Zambia, we've got, I don't know if there are any loans that are on fixed terms. We have what are called floating interest rates, meaning that whenever there's a revision in the interest rates by central bank, automatically it triggers an adjustment upwards also for loans. And that also affects, you know, the value of your loan as well as how much interest you're going to pay. Obviously, it's going to go up.
So the time when they send you a message and tell you we can increase your tenure or okay. So when the central bank actually makes policy changes, it actually directly affects our personal finances. Huh?
Yes, absolutely. It affects our personal finances in a number of ways. I've already mentioned your budget is going to be constricted because what you were able to afford last month has become much more expensive. Yeah, there's feedback from Mr. Lubase, who's online, is saying, I can also add on to say, quite all right, one cannot avoid inflation, but one can manage their scarce resources as to the effects that might come as a result of inflation. So Mr. Lubase is advising us all to also be able to manage our scarce resources, which is great advice.
Definitely is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Of course, this is the Ndalama Insights Business Show. And of course, remember, if you want to watch it live as well, you can follow it on YouTube. Simply search for Mokonki. For now, we'll take a short break. We'll be back.
We are still listening to the Lama Insight Business Show, brought to you by Insight Partners Africa. Leave your comment or question on Mukonki's YouTube channel. Then the Lama Insights, turning your challenges into actionable insights.
Welcome back, and of course, this is the Ndalama Insights Business Show. Today, we're looking at recent economic events and how they may impact your personal finances. And with me in the studio is Mokonki Mokonkela. Now, Mokonki, let's broaden our perspective. Our personal finances are closely connected to the national and global economies. Could you elaborate on this?
That's true. So our personal finances are connected to our national economy as well as global economy. Let me start with global and how global affects our national economy. Global, Zambia is highly dependent on copper. Copper prices are set by some metal exchange. So if the copper prices are low, it means that Zambia's performance in terms of exports, value of exports also goes down because of the metal exchange prices that are not set in Zambia, by the way. I wonder how that works out anyway. Maybe you could have a look at it later. You have a product that you manufacture, but someone else sets the price for you. Maybe I'm just being layman here, Leslie. But then that has an impact on our national economy as well, which would affect our GDP. And as a result, also affecting the performance of our kwacha against the dollar. And because of that, it also affects the prices for goods and services, which results in an increase in the inflation rate, which also results in an increase in the interest rates. I hope you can see how this is a ripple effect in terms of it goes round, really. So other than the copper prices, we could also talk about fuel, which is something we're experiencing right now. I mean, Zambia doesn't produce its own oil or fuel. So if globally the fuel prices are increasing, definitely the cost of fuel in Zambia is also going to be impacted. And that is also going to result in an increase in the production costs for many companies, which ultimately will also result in an increase for the products and services. And so this is the effect of global economies as well as national economies on our personal finances. And in terms of the direct impact, I already mentioned this affects your budgets. For those of us that actually think about how we spend money and how we make it, it's going to affect how we make our money, because it means that our investments are the value is going to be eroded. We might not make as much return on investment as we had wanted to. In terms of our expenses, we are going to see an increase in the expenditure on our budgets, family budgets, individual budgets. And so this definitely affects us. Our income has to be stretched way further than we had anticipated. We are unable to save as much as we had hoped to save. Ultimately, we can't even invest what we wanted to invest, and that leaves us quite stuck. I hope I'm not painting a gloom picture. I'm saying all this to say that you need to be alert to how the economy affects your personal finances, so that you can take measures and start looking at investment areas that beat inflation.
Mhm.
Yes.
Now, in a stable economy with low inflation, the family can sort of survive on a single source of income and so on and so forth. But with all this that is going on, what steps should families take to navigate the impact of these economic changes we're talking about on their personal finances?
So steps you can take is to cut on non-essential expenses. This is really hard. I mean, for some of us, we love to eat go out, eat at expensive restaurants, have our nice wine once in a while, go out on adventures. I love Livingstone and don't know whatever else. So you need to cut off on those non-essential expenses, and also focus on how you can increase income. So in as much as you are also looking at reducing your expenses, focus on how you can increase your income. How can you also, afford some of your family or individual expenses? Start a garden. Just do a garden at your house. Do some vegetables, tomatoes, and others, so that you avoid buying these onions. And just see how you can overall manage your scarce resources, as Mr. Luase has already advised us. And that is one way you can manage in terms of these difficult economic periods.
Mhm.
Mm.
Okay. Now, your explanation sort of helps us understand how economic forces can affect ordinary households, and why staying informed and adaptable is, essential. But what can our listeners do to stay informed and adapt to these changes?
Uh, Always listen to the Bank of Zambia briefings. The BOZ always has a briefing that you need to listen to, because this is when they communicate to us, different things like the interest rates that we just heard yesterday. And we've got other institutions also that help us in terms of inflation changes every month. Regularly pay attention to this, because one crucial question you must be asking yourself whenever you see any changes in the economic factors like inflation, interest rates, GDP, and so many other economic factors that I could talk about. I'm speaking as though I'm an economist. I'm actually an accountant. Sorry. So I'm using economic terms because they affect all of us. So one question you need to ask yourself is, how does this, increase in the interest rate affect my personal finances and disposable income? Always ask yourself that question. So yesterday the BOZ revised the base rate. Now we are at 14%, somewhere there. So ask yourself, how does this 14% affect my budget and my savings? How does it affect? So that when you answer that question, you'll be able to know what actionable steps you now need to take so that you can align yourself to achieve your overall financial goals. Yes.
All right. Well, Konke, it's been a pleasure having you on the show and discussing this critical topic with you. But thanks for sharing your insights. Huh?
Thank you, Leslie. And I must say, I don't know why I can't see the camera today, so I don't know what people have been seeing online today. I'm unable to see myself. I hope this video actually was produced. Thank you so much, and I would like to say good morning to Nick Mwelwa. Thank you for watching, and everybody that was online.
All right. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Dalama Insights Business Show. Thank you for tuning in. And we definitely do hope you found this discussion on recent economic events and their impact on personal finances both informative and practical. Remember to stay tuned to Radio 4 for more valuable insights and updates on various topics. Until next time, take care and manage your finances wisely.